Well, hey, welcome back. We are in Daniel chapter 5 today, and we're going to be looking at another king, King Belshazzar, and his interaction with Daniel, as well as a vision that he sees. Belshazzar is one who's going to find out that you do not mock God and just get away with it, that God ultimately will respond to that. And so I'm going to read to verses 1 through 4 in chapter 5, and this will set it all up for us. It says, King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords, and he drank wine in the front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem to be brought, that the kings and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. And they drank wine, and they praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So King Belshazzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, has passed, and it is now, there's a different king ruling. It does say here that Nebuchadnezzar, says Nebuchadnezzar his father in verse 2. Just one real quick point. That does not necessarily mean that Belshazzar is the actual son of Nebuchadnezzar. His father would mean one who is in his lineage. And most people would say, if you study history and you look at things, that Belshazzar would have been the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar and is ruling and reigning alongside his father at this time. And that makes sense later on in here. We will see as Belshazzar will award anyone who can give him an interpretation of what he's about to see, reward them, and make them the third ruler in the kingdom. Well, that means there has to be 1 and 2, and that would be Belshazzar and his father. Now, here's what's going on. So, Belshazzar is having a drunken feast, a drunken party with his lords, and it says with his wives, his concubines. And when they start drinking, he then proceeds to ask for the golden and silver vessels that were taken from the temple by Nebuchadnezzar many years earlier. And he is doing this to mock God. And that is the great issue that's going on here. He is mocking God. And once he does this, you can picture the scene in your mind. They're laughing, they're joking, there's drunkenness, and they're sipping from these, and all of a sudden, it says here in verse 5, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. So a hand appears and it begins to write on the wall. It says that Belshazzar is terrified. His appearance changes, one from a drunkenness, a boasting, and a mockery of God to absolute fear and terror. He sends for his wise men, similar to what we saw earlier with Nebuchadnezzar, and he asks them to interpret, what does this mean? What is going on? And just like we see also in the case of Nebuchadnezzar, these men do not know what this means. They don't know what has been written. They don't know what it means. It says then verses 10 through 12, it says the queen. Now, most likely this is the queen mother, not his wife, because we've already been introduced to all his wives. It says his wives and his concubines were there. It says here the queen would come in. And so this is most likely his mother. And she comes in and she addresses him and she tells him about Daniel and reminds him of Daniel and saying Daniel is one who interpreted for King Nebuchadnezzar. It says that he has a spirit of the gods in him. And so Belshazzar quickly calls for Daniel. Daniel is sent to him. He tells Daniel, I'll reward you. You're going to get a purple robe. You're going to get gold. You're going to get this high position. Just please tell me what this is. Now, it is interesting if you take a moment to note and look at Daniel's response to Belshazzar, and you compare that to Nebuchadnezzar or even Darius, which we'll see in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel seems to be completely unimpressed with Belshazzar. The way he addresses him is different. Remember when he addresses King Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar has this vision of a tree, he says, Daniel is disturbed, and he says, oh, let this be for your enemies. Here, not so much. Daniel actually here, we start to see him rebuke Belshazzar. We see a rebuke, and he speaks to him in this manner and talking to him about what is about to happen to him. And he tells him, he's like, you know what? You should know better. Your grandfather, your father, Nebuchadnezzar, is one who is driven mad into the wilderness for 7 years because of his pride, because of his boasting, because of his unwillingness to serve God. And he's telling him, he's basically pointing the finger, you saw it. You know this had to be true. You heard the decree of Nebuchadnezzar, but you don't care. You didn't take it seriously. And now this judgment is upon you. And there were 4 words that were written. Mene, mene, tekel, parsen. And what they mean is this. If you just the words themselves, numbered, weighed, divided. And it is not so much that these wise men, these enchanters, could not read the words. It is that they had no idea what it meant. They didn't understand it. But God gave the meaning to Daniel. And Daniel shared it with Belshazzar. Here's what it means. He says, weighed. It is mentioned twice here. You have, numbered. Your days have been numbered. And it's emphasized twice, and then assurance of it. It has been numbered. And your days are coming to an end. And he says, weighed. You've been weighed in a balance. You have been found wanting. You've not fulfilled your duty as a king. This is another important thing to note, and we didn't get to spend much time on this the last time, but as a king, even if you're the king of the Persians, the Medes, or the Babylonians, you're to serve God and honor God in the way that you rule. Belshazzar, no interest in that. And God says, you're found wanting. And then finally he says it's divided. Your kingdom is going to be divided. Well, the reward is given to Daniel, but to Belshazzar, his kingdom is taken from him. That night, it says, he dies. He dies because of his rebellion to God, not willing to listen to God and to humble himself, and King Darius becomes the king. And we'll pick up next time in Daniel chapter 6, looking at King Darius.